Hey, what's up everybody? My name is Steve. This is the Phantom Show. It's Monday again, which must mean that it's time for more Monday Suck. Today we're taking a look at E.T. No, not the very successful Steven Spielberg movie from 1982, but rather the Atari video game from 1982 based on the movie. Now, the game was also relatively successful, but it's also one of the more infamous video games ever produced for a variety of reasons, one of which being that it's known for being not very good. Atari paid $20 million to get the license to E.T., which is equivalent to $55 million in today's dollars, and they gave the guy who designed the game 5 weeks to get it done because they had to get it out for the 1982 Christmas season. Well, I mean, they didn't have to, but Christmas time is the busiest time for video game sales, and E.T. was still really, really popular, so they wanted to rush that mess out as fast as they could to try to make money on it. And they did make some money on it. The game sold very well initially, but kind of went off a cliff after that. This title is derided very frequently for its gameplay. Basically, you play as E.T. and you fall down holes collecting pieces of your telephone. You know, E.T. phone home. You got to collect the telephone pieces, put the telephone together, and, well, phone home. But the pit mechanic is annoying. Most people hated it because it was almost impossible to get out of them after you fell in, and the game just wasn't very well received. And in fact, a lot of those thousands of copies that they sold ended up being returned because people didn't like them. Now, they only had 5 weeks to produce this game, so obviously they probably weren't going to get something very great out of that, but the same token, they kind of missed a mark because they flew the guy who made this game out to meet Steven Spielberg. The guy went over some stuff with him, came back, and he built a concept of the game. He took that back and showed it to Spielberg, and Spielberg was like, "Nah, couldn't you made something more like Pac-Man?" Pac-Man, of course, being one of the most popular games that was around at the time. And the guy was like, no, it's okay. This is better than Pac-Man. I want to be more creative. It'll be okay. Well, in retrospect, the guy's like, I think I should have listened to Spielberg and maybe made something a little more like Pac-Man. But anyhow, E.T. was a moderate success for its time, but it's considered a colossal flop and one of the things that triggered the video game crash of 1983. Copies of E.T. were infamously buried in a landfill in New Mexico. That story for years was an urban legend until a documentary crew went out there in the around 2015 and actually dug it up and found copies of games there. Now, the urban legend was that Atari had buried like millions and millions of copies of E.T. out there. That's not actually what happened. There are multiple games buried out there. It was just a bunch of excess inventory that Atari buried, and only about 10% of them are actually E.T. games. So that urban legend was a little bit off the mark, but there were indeed some games, and probably still are some games, buried in that landfill. So E.T. is basically a classic example of what not to do with a licensed game, and we're going to be looking at a lot more of that when I do my video specifically on licensed games, which is coming up real soon. Retrospectively, people still think this game sucks. You'd be hard-pressed to find anybody who's going to give it a positive review. It's just hot garbage is what it is. And again, they only made it in 5 weeks, so it probably wasn't going to be that good to begin with, but it just really stinks. It's one of those things, if you want to buy a copy of this, you can still buy them for very cheap. Not many people would want to unless you want it as some kind of collector's item. I don't, but they are out there if you want them. But yeah, E.T. totally missed the mark. One of several misfires for Atari. The other was their own adaptation of Pac-Man, which was crappy in multiple ways. We might look at that for a future episode of Monday Suck, but I'm going to leave it alone for tonight. So that's everything for now, guys. My video on licensed video games is coming out real soon. You're going to want to check that out. I do thank you for watching, and have a great night.